So hello everyone and welcome to this Global Fleet Champions webinar on the safe system and fleets. So this webinar is being run as part of the run up to Road Safety Week 2022 in New Zealand. So a huge thank you to the Road Safety Week sponsors, Waka Kotahi, NZ Transport Agency and Becca for helping us to put this webinar on today. If you're new to our webinars, Global Fleet Champions is a partnership campaign administered by Break, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths, injuries and pollution caused by vehicles driven for work purposes. If you want to learn more about the work that we do and to access fleet safety resources and more Global Fleet Champions events, then please go to the Global Fleet Champions website, globalfleetchampions.org. And if you've not come across Break before, we're a road safety charity working to prevent road deaths and injuries, to make communities safer and to provide free support to people who've been bereaved and injured in crashes through a range of initiatives. And one of those initiatives is Global Fleet Champions, which is why we're running this webinar today. So looking at the safe system and fleets, we'll move straight on to the first of our fantastic speakers. I'm delighted to introduce Adam Beattie. Adam is the Area Programme Manager for the Road to Zero Speed and Infrastructure Programme at Waka Kotahi NZ Transport Agency. And Adam has been with Waka Kotahi for the past 2 years and partners with local councils in Auckland and Northern regions for the development and delivery of the Road to Zero Speed and Infrastructure Programme. He's also involved in road safety strategy and policy, along with assisting with the development of the State Highway Road to Zero programme. Prior to joining Waka Kotahi, Adam was technical lead for active modes at Auckland Transport, as well as being team leader for AT's speed management programme. And he has extensive experience in road safety and transport policy, both here in New Zealand with Auckland Transport and also back home in Scotland. So we're delighted to have him with us today. So welcome, Adam.
Fine, I'll share my screen. And can everyone see that?
Yeah, we've got that up.
Cool. Slideshow. Cool. As Caroline said, my name's Adam Beattie and I work with Waka Kotahi. I'm one of the area programme managers in the Road to Zero Speed and Infrastructure programme, delivering speed and infrastructure changes across the country. I have a particular focus in Auckland and Northland, but I do help around the whole country with that. I'm also seconded a couple of days a week in the Road to Zero strategy side and do a lot of work around modelling to see what zero would look like in 2050. So I'm here today to talk about safe system principles. One of the kind of first questions I kind of ask myself and ask others is, do you believe we can actually get to zero? We talk about road to zero, is it aspirational or is it something we can get to? I firmly believe we can get to it, and I firmly believe that we actually have the tools in the toolbox as it stands to get there or thereabouts to zero. So our strategy, we have road to zero that comes through the why, the how and the what. The why is Vision Zero, and that's our ethical stance about not accepting serious road trauma on our network. The how is the safe system principles that we use to enable the why, and the what is actually getting into those specific interventions and targets and timelines to get to zero. What I'll speak about today will be the why and a bit about the how. Now, I started road safety back in the late 90s, and at that time we spent a lot of time looking at the causations of crashes, and we would do quite forensic examinations of crashes, and that was our kind of whole focus. And in lots of places we'd reduce the crash numbers, but one of the things that we never looked at was we never looked at the consequences of crashes. We never looked at the severity. It was always around the frequency, and that approach and that reactive approach leaves risk and it leaves trauma on the network. What we have now with the safe system principles and Road to Zero is saying that and understanding that people will make mistakes, that trauma will still exist on the network, and those mistakes will be inevitable even if they're less frequent, but serious injury and death is not inevitable. And when we look at a crash, rather than looking at it as a kind of blame thing, we have to look at it through the eyes of being a system failure. So in New Zealand's Road to Zero strategy, there are 7 safe system principles, but there's 4 that I kind of focus on quite a bit. And the first 2 are around about the human aspect of it, and the second 2 here are more of that system response to those things. And as I said earlier, we promote for good choices, we promote for good behaviour and good road user behaviour, but we have to plan for mistakes. No one deliberately, or very few people deliberately set out to have a crash. So when these mistakes happen, we have to plan for those. And then if we're going to plan for those mistakes, we have to use as our limiting factor the acknowledgement that the human body can only withstand a certain amount of force. It only has a certain tolerance to force, and we have to design the system to ensure that that force is not exceeded. When we're designing that system, we have to look at it as having a shared responsibility around improving road safety, whether it's through road user choices or whether it's through designing better roads and roadsides or police enforcement or better vehicles. And when we're looking at the system, we should be looking at strengthening all parts of the system so that if one part of the system fails, the other parts of the system ensure that the outcome isn't a poor one leading to death or serious trauma. And I suppose a simple way of looking at collisions, it's essentially an energy equation. And the faster you go, because speed's a proxy for energy, the faster you go, the more energy there is in a collision. And that relationship is not a linear relationship. It's one where if you have a crash and you're going that little bit faster, there's almost an exponential relationship to the severity of that. And this diagram of the large building shows it. If you fall out of a first floor window, it's essentially equivalent of being hit by a vehicle at 30 kph if you're a pedestrian. If you fall from the 3rd floor window, that's 50 kph. So the speed has jumped by 2/3, but the energy involved in the collisions went up by a factor of 3. And as you see, once you get up to 80 kph, it's an 8th floor fall, 100 kph, these things are not survivable. So we have to make sure that the system that we design allows people to live and walk away. Sure, many people have seen this slide before it, and it really looks at, we know when we design a system what interactions we'll have between different road users, and we know where those interactions will occur and what type of conflicts or collisions will occur if someone makes a mistake. And what this graph shows is that at 30 kph, if you're a pedestrian and you're hit by a car, it won't be a very pleasant experience, but you're unlikely to be killed or seriously hurt by it. Similarly, if you come out of an intersection and you've made a mistake and someone runs into the side of you, we know that it speeds up to about 50 kilometres an hour. You're unlikely to be killed or seriously hurt. And we know that it speeds up to about 70 kilometres an hour, I should say, not miles, 70 kilometres an hour. A head-on crash, you're likely to walk away from. But as you can see, once you get above each of those speed thresholds, the risk of suffering severe trauma increases very quickly. So people are at the heart of the system. We have to design for people. And the way that I look at it is that our people, they're the consumers of our system. Our road users are our consumers of our system. And we have to understand, as well as we train them and all the things we use, that mistakes will happen. So it's not necessarily around that reducing of crashes. It's about the prevention of those crashes resulting in death and serious injury. And we're the system designers in that, so we have to ensure that the system doesn't fail them when they make mistakes. And one of the things that I kind of think of is that if we were a system designer in another part of industry, say we were designing toys, we would know that if we're designing for a 3-year-old, we might want a toy and think a toy would be played with a certain way, but we would design that toy to make sure that it wouldn't hurt the 3-year-old who was playing with it, no matter what they did with it. And that's where if you take that analogy through to road safety, people will make mistakes, but we should make sure that our system can tolerate that. So it comes around to the question about reframing the conversation. And it's not like the way that, say, I used to do it when I started in road safety about what caused the crash. It's really much more around the question of asking, why did the crash lead to someone being killed or seriously hurt? Where did the system fail? And if we can answer that question, we can get much closer to having a safe system. So one of the things that we talk about here is looking at where harm occurs in the system and the level of harm and what influences it. And then, for example, in roads and roadsides, there's features there that can either increase or decrease the severity of a crash. The mismatch of vehicles can increase or decrease the severity of crash. If you're in a larger vehicle, your energy will transfer into the smaller vehicle or into the pedestrian or cyclist. And the other main one, obviously, is that collision speed. The quicker you're going, the more energy you're carrying, the more energy gets transferred into whatever you hit. As I say, it's not the causes of crashes that cause the harm, it's the energy that's involved in the crashes. So when we look at crashes versus injuries, we're really looking at harm minimisation, because if we're accepting that some crashes are inevitable. And various parts of the system pick up on this. With vehicle technology, we look at stuff within the vehicle, both passive and active safety, things like crumple zones in the vehicle, seat belts, side airbags, also other technology like autonomous emergency braking, which will bring your speed down and might just take that little bit of energy out of a collision you would have or turn it into a near miss. You'd be looking at stuff like lane assist, which would keep you in your lane if you were beginning to deviate. Roadside features, stuff that can cause harm. Obviously point hazards like trees and other pieces of vegetation that falls off of cliffs. You've got culverts, you've got electricity poles and things. These are all things that really can cause harm. And then we have to look at how we minimise the harm with that and what interventions we'd have for that. Speed of impact, it's quite clear that less speed results in substantially less harm. Protection for vulnerable users, that really has to be within our towns and cities at the forefront of our mind. The harm that occurs often in these locations does not occur within the vehicle, it occurs to those external to the vehicle. And then following on from that, you really are talking around about that road user incompatibility, truck versus car, truck versus bicycle or pedestrian, car versus bicycle or pedestrian. Similar to the urban side, the energy is transferred to those vulnerable users and they have much worse outcomes. They're not surrounded by a steel shell and all that protective gear we have in a vehicle. So in conclusion, it's not about blaming road users. As you can see, that this man here is clearly distracted. He's talking to his kids. He's pulled out into the intersection and he's about to be involved in a nose-to-side collision with very little crumple zone there. And we as system designers have designed that intersection that way, so that's on us. It's really about making sure we manage the energy when those mistakes are made. So if you transferred that same location and you had this type of intersection, the energy has been removed from the collision so that if he or she is distracted, that mistake would not lead to them being killed or seriously hurt. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks so much, Adam, for that. Some really interesting points in there and a great overview of the safe system principles and some of the things that we talk about as part of the safe system as well. So if you've got any questions for Adam relating to his presentation, then please do feel free to put them in the chat and we'll cover those off when we get to the Q&A session later on. But moving straight on in the meantime to our second speaker. Next up, we have Marcus Brown, and Marcus is a road safety technical director with Becker and has over 25 years of experience in transportation. He's passionate about creating safer, healthier and more sustainable transport networks. He's a champion of the safe system approach that underpins the Vision Zero ambition of no deaths and serious injuries on our roads. And having worked on safe system projects for the last 6 years, he has a strong understanding of the practicalities of road safety retrofit and the design challenges it presents as well. So great to have him along today too. Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks, Caroline.
Great. If you would like to share your screen.
Well, hopefully I'm as successful as Adam.
Great. Yeah, that's in the slideshow now.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Marcus Brown, as Caroline says. So I work for Becker. We're a New Zealand-based multidisciplinary consultancy. So we've been around for about 100 years now. We've got offices throughout Australia, New Zealand, and Asia, and employ about 3,000 people. But one of the areas that we work in, amongst many, is transportation and road safety. So today we're going to talk about the safe roads and roadsides in the safe system environment. So Adam's done a very good job of outlining what the safe system is all about. And you can see here more simply, there's the 7 components, but more simply there's force, which is safe speeds, safe vehicles and safe road use, and also safe roads and roadsides. So we're going to talk about just that component about the safe roads and roadsides today. So this lad here, he's you can see he's got his training wheels on. So I think this for me exemplifies what safe system is about. You got the training wheels that really they're there to prevent the child falling off the bike. But we don't stop there. We actually give him a crash helmet as well, just in case he falls off. And that's really the essence of what safe systems about, is having that sort of fallback in case things do go wrong. So traditionally, our approach to roads and roadside has been one of that mainly relies on the train wheels, so keeping people on the road, avoiding the crashes in the first place. But now we're actually looking at that complete system and how can we wrap around and actually accommodate safely those mistakes. So here you can see, imagine going up to a hotel balcony and you actually see that there's no barrier on the balcony. You know, you'd take a big step backwards and probably lock the door on you on the room and actually go nowhere near it. And you'd probably be having a hard word with the hotel for, you know, why have I not got a barrier on my balcony? And to me, that's the kind of risk that we're not prepared to accept, say in a building, but on a road network, we live with that all the time. So I think that's definitely a different way of thinking, and not necessarily wait until someone falls off the balcony before we actually put a barrier up, which again has been more the philosophy in terms of road safety engineering in the past. So where we sit in New Zealand in terms of road fatalities, you can see we're over 3 times worse than some of the best performing countries. You'll see Sweden there at sort of 2.5 deaths per 100,000 population. They were actually higher than New Zealand only in 1990, but they've kind of really embraced the safe system approach, and that's where it's got them in a relatively short space of time. You know, 25, 30 years, and they're kind of amongst the world leaders. So what are the main causes of our crashes on our roads and our deaths? Head-on crashes, they account for more road deaths than any other type of crash on state highways. People run off the road. You can see here, I mean, this is probably an example of, you know, if you use the training wheels approach, you just relying on signs and road markings to actually keep people on the road. We've got a really straight piece of road. Why has the driver left the road? We won't actually know the answer always, but we know it happens. And unforgiving roadsides are a significant contributor to road trauma. You see, power poles are amongst the most dangerous thing you could crash into. Power poles and trees, and they line our roads, our real roads, everywhere. So the T-bone, the right angle crash. Now these tend to be really severe, even in urban environments at lower speeds, but also in the higher speed rural environments. And essentially, you've got the width of your driver's door to protect you, so there's not a lot of crumple zone in there, and yeah, they can result in some really serious outcomes. And finally, pedestrians and cyclists, vulnerable users, they're really vulnerable to serious injury, particularly when they're struck by a vehicle, and then that can be at speeds, as Adam says, 30 kilometers an hour is considered safe speed, or safer speed for vulnerable users to be struck. But once you get above that, then there's a significant risk of harm in those cases. And then actually, the interesting thing is, on most of our roads, we've got 50 kilometers an hour speed limits in urban areas. So it's quite possible for somebody to be driving within the speed limit and actually cause some serious harm. So to me, this is another example of why we need safe system. We've got the training wheels, we've got the yellow lines to encourage people not to overtake. The sight distance is poor coming up, but we've got nothing to actually physically stop people to cross the centre line and potentially have a head-on crash. And one of the things I often hear when I talk to people around this is a bit of blame. It's about other people. Well, it's about the people who are poor drivers, and perhaps they're not slept, or and they're tired and get distracted. But regardless of that blame, in a head-on crash, there's always another party, and there could be you or I, who are families in the car, and they are unfortunately all too often get caught up in this really serious trauma, and there's nothing really, there's no fallback to prevent that. So here's an example of something. This sort of example, we've got a two-lane road. We've got a median barrier in the middle. You can see that's wire rope median barrier, and we've got side barriers that are wire rope as well. So this kind of arrangement would reduce the risk to users by 90%. So it's a massive increase in safety, and we've got the full bay. If someone does cross the centre line, the energy is going to get absorbed and people are going to walk away. It's also much more cost effective than say building a full lane motorway. Roundabouts, they reduce speeds at intersections, but they also reduce that all important impact angle. So it's not actually possible to have that right angle crash. So they're really effective in our armory in terms of intersections. Raised safety platforms, they're becoming much more commonplace internationally, and we're starting to see them in Australia and New Zealand. And again, they actually just for that conflict point where we've got conflicting vehicles, they actually slow people down to the safe system levels. And also for pedestrians, they'll tend to be a little bit more severe, but again, the idea is raised safety platforms. They just take the speeds down at that conflict point, the point where people cross, just down to sort of 30 kilometers an hour, where they can survive in the case of a mistake. The other really important thing for in urban areas is separation. So you see a cyclist here. There's a bus and a truck in front of that. Buses and trucks, and we know they have different kind of dynamics. They're difficult to see. The sight lines for drivers make it difficult to see cyclists. So the best thing we can do is actually completely separate these users. And importantly, at intersections, that separation is really important because cyclists all too often get caught in the swept path of larger vehicles, particularly when they get caught in the blind spot. So that's a really important part for us. So all these types of measures, whether they be barrier to protect a vehicle from falling off a cliff, the separation of traffic from cyclists and pedestrians, or safer slow speed crossing points, all these measures, when combined with the other safe system cornerstones, such as safer cars, more appropriate speeds, and safer drivers, can all contribute significantly to reducing the road toll and reducing serious injuries on our roads, and taking us more towards that zero that we strive for. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Marcus, as well. And similarly, if you have any questions relating to Marcus's presentation, then please do put those in the chat too, and we'll raise those when we get to the Q&A session. So moving on to our next speaker. Next up, we've got Mike Massar, who is the Health and Safety Manager at the Department of Conservation at Te Papa Atapai. And it's great to have Mike with us today. He's been in this role for more than 20 years and with DOC for over 35 years as well. And he's going to talk today about some of the measures that DOC have in place in relation to their drivers and vehicles within their fleet, and how they work to address their own road risk within DOC. So it's great to have him along. Whilst over half of his life has been in Christchurch, he is originally from Dunedin, and in his own words, he's a Dunedinite through and through and can't shake that blue and gold colour. So that's good to hear too. Great to have you along, Mike. Hopefully we can hear you.
Thank you, Carolyn, for that introduction. I actually decided not to do a PowerPoint. It looks like Carolyn's put a couple of slides in there. It's very nice, but I decided just to talk through it. Hopefully that's okay. So we've had quite a journey in the vehicle area. In about 2015, we developed a critical risk program, and DOC's critical risks included on-road vehicle driving. We got that from the data, and just talking to people was pretty obvious that was a clear risk of us. DOC manages about 30% of New Zealand land, over 30%. We have 700 vehicles on the road. Hopefully not all at the same time, but certainly we have 700 vehicles in our fleet. And we drive about 1 million kilometres a month, so it's quite high profile for us and quite a risk. And unfortunately, we have been involved in some accidents which haven't had a good outcome at all. So as I said, in 2015, we developed a critical risk program, and on-road vehicle driving was right on the top of that. So we thought, how are we going to address this? It's so big. And so we brought in the bow tie process. Hopefully listeners here are aware of bow tie. So I brought it in about 2015-16 and organised a group of DOC staff, cross-section of managers and staff, PSA, our union. And we developed a bow tie around on-road vehicle driving. It was actually my first attempt at a bow tie also, and it was a bit of an eye-opener for me and the team. Bow tie is a bit of a risk assessment tool, but we used it more of a gap analysis, where we were able to identify all those controls that we did have in place, but due to the bow tie and how we work the bow tie, which you just get inputs from everybody in the room, we recognised that we had a whole lot of things around vehicle driving we weren't controlling it at all. We had a whole lot of gaps in our processes. A couple of those gaps included the ages of our vehicles. We had a policy back then of having a fleet that was replaced every 4 to 5 years, but our average vehicle in DOC then was around about 10 years old, so we weren't meeting our own policies. We didn't have a consistent maintenance program. All it was taking it for a warrant of fitness every year, and of course the way dock vehicles get driven, which is a lot of some off-road use, needs more than just a warrant of fitness every year. Driver behaviour itself was quite an issue. We had no real way of measuring driver behaviour. Training, we had quite poor training programs. It was just an as required based on a manager who may ask for it in a certain region of New Zealand. And so the bow tie, as I said, was quite an eye-opener, and quite concerning that the gaps that we had in place. So basically that resulted in a business case going to our senior leadership team about 2016, 17. It takes long. I don't know if you've been involved in developing business cases, but business case in a government department is not an easy process, I can tell you. So it took a long time to develop a business case for senior leadership team to approve a number of initiatives that we all wanted to put in place, and it was basically a $1 million investment, and that was mostly around telematics in vehicles, GPS in vehicles, and also development of some on-road online driver training modules. And along with that, we also reviewed our maintenance policies and put in place a program of fleet upgrades, which we're still going through at the moment. And I am pleased to say our average age of our fleet is a lot less than what it was 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. A very important part of this process is bringing staff along with you on this journey. And so we involved our main union, which is the PSA. Probably 90 to 95% of staff are members of the PSA and DOC. We had a high performance engagement team then, in fact we still do, but HPE and PSA were both involved in the development of this program and putting the business case together. It was just so important to have your workers engaged in this. So the business case was approved, and we went out to tender for both the GPS and on-road driver training modules, and went through that procurement process, which was again in the government departments quite long. And so from that we then decided, well, had to discuss as to how we were going to roll this program out, and it was probably the biggest rollout that I've been involved in. We've got 50 to 60 DOC offices or main offices around the country, plus a number of field bases. So a team of us, we broke up and basically went to every location and did the rollout, which was predominantly around GPS. The on-road online driver modules were a bit easier to do, but the GPS rollout required some explanation. We had built-in thresholds of driving, and it was quite controversial with people. Some people sort of raised their arms and said, "Am I being tracked everywhere I go?" and this sort of thing. But with the PSA, we worked out a process where that didn't occur, and although we did have the ability to track vehicles that may have been overdue, of course. So the fleet, as I said, was also upgraded. Maintenance plans were improved, and then so that came in place in about 2019. So it's been pretty much 3 years ago, sort of to this month, that this system has been in place. And while we have, we still have occasionally pushback from staff about they've got pinged because they were doing X number of kilometres an hour, or they didn't have a fatigue brake. So we not only measure speed through GPS telematics, we also measure fatigue brakes, and there is a requirement for people to take a break every couple of hours or every 4 hours or so. And if they haven't done that, then it comes through as a notification. So we're actually reviewing it at the moment. We got a company late last year to review our telematics process, and we're just going through a review now, but it won't result in significant change. It's the GPS side of things are here to stay. We have had some good success over the years. From the first month when we measured the number of speed notifications to 2 or 3 years later, they dropped by about 80%. And our driver risk, in other words, measuring the risk potential of our incidents, dropped by over 50%. And we have a target, I think it's around about 70 to 80% over 5 years, so 5 or 6 years. So we're pretty much on target with that. And I don't recall any serious vehicle incidents involving our staff since we've had the program in place. So we're very happy with the improvement that we have made. I must say that introducing safety measures into your organisation, it's not just the one thing you do. I don't think, say, GPS alone or on-road online driving modules or maintenance programs or upgrade a fleet in isolation will do the trick. So we brought everything together, and the 4 main things, as I said, was fleet replacement, maintenance, driver behaviour, and training were the main ones that we recognised, and put them all in place pretty much at the same time. So, yes, we're pretty much delighted with the progress we've had, and but you can't take your foot off the accelerator, although we do want people to do that, of course, but we certainly want to keep driving forward with what we've achieved over the last 3 years. Thanks, Karen.
That's great, thanks, Mike, and really, it was really interesting everything that you have done as an organisation, and the results that you've seen so far as well, which is great. And I absolutely agree with what you were saying about the fact that it's not just one element that solves everything. It is that combination of factors and having a number of different things in place to reduce the risk. So thanks very much for that. Just before we come on to the Q&A part, and we'll get all of the speakers back up in a second, but just before we do that, I did mention at the start that this webinar is part of the run-up to Road Safety Week, and this year the week takes place the 9th to the 15th of May, and it has the theme Road Safety Heroes, recognising all of those who work to make our roads safer and also support people following a crash, from emergency services to planners, engineers, community campaigners, support organisations, anyone who is involved in that work. It will also highlight the part that we can all play in making our roads safer during Road Safety Week as well. And we do support, Break as an organisation supports the Road to Zero campaign and strategy, and Road Safety Week will also form part of that sort of campaign support as well. But there are lots of different ways to get involved and run activities, or just to raise awareness of the week within your organisation. And we're also encouraging organisations to recognise their own road safety heroes internally, within their staff and contractors, and in the local community during the week too. So if you're not already signed up, go to the website roadsafetyweek.org.nz, and you can register for a free electronic action pack of resources and activity ideas to get involved in the week. In addition, if you're not based within New Zealand, the Australian Road Safety Week is the week after our Road Safety Week, but you're also welcome to use our road safety resources wherever you are in the world. It doesn't have to be New Zealand, so you can still feel free to access our resources if you wish. And that's just a little bit about Road Safety Week. So what I will do next is just come on to the Q&A. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll just ask if I can ask our speakers to put their webcams back on and mute. We'll just get this going. The other thing that you can do, if you prefer, is to raise your hand if you've got a question, and I can also change the settings to allow you to ask the question directly to speakers if you'd like, or you can type it into the chat. It's up to you on that one, so just feel free to do that. And whilst we are awaiting any questions that come through, I've got a couple of questions here as well. So one to probably Marcus and Adam in the main, is in terms of the design elements of what you're doing. When you were talking about the differences between sizes of vehicles and obviously energy and forces, and how they have an impact on smaller vehicles and more vulnerable road users. When we talk about protecting vulnerable road users, we often tend to automatically think about things like protected cycle lanes. But what else do you have that's within that sort of package of things that you're doing, both in terms of design, but also that you might see on vehicle features that fleets can put in place as well to help protect vulnerable road users? Who wants to go first, Marcus or Adam?
First. I think that we were actually quite good in recognising longitudinally going along the road about the separation of cyclists and vehicles, and we know the benefits you would get from providing separated cycleways. But many of the collisions we get are at intersections where that segregation and physical segregation can happen, and you're ended up having those kind of conflicts in real time. And I think that because of the sheer difference in mass, that the interactions between them can be catastrophic. One of the kind of biggest benefits you can get are things like vehicle underruns, so that if a vehicle turns left in the blind spot when there's a straight ahead cyclist, it really reduces the risk of the cyclist going under the wheels. Mirrors, for example, that kind of highlight the blind spots as well. There are a number of things that we can do both in the vehicle side and in the kind of infrastructure side that can kind of minimise those conflicts taking place. There's been a whole load of great work done in London who had a real issue with this, particularly with construction vehicles and turning left against straight ahead cyclists, and they did a whole load of work to try and minimise those types of collisions. Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, I just totally agree with what you said there, Adam. I mean, I think we've got to in terms of infrastructure, we can either provide some separation, which is the best thing overall, but also there's environments, as you say, in town centres and cities where we're perhaps a bit more pedestrian dominated, and we need to just slow our speeds down to actually kind of give those guys a chance. But I will acknowledge particularly cyclists and larger vehicles. They are a particular problem because even with not much speed, as you point out, Adam, they can be really serious and catastrophic. So there's probably a lot on the vehicle technology side there that could help.
Great, thanks both of you. One question for which I'll put to all of you, so Mike, this as well. You've got a lot of great information there, all of you, around the safe system and things that you can do, and a lot of it is not so much technical information, but I guess some of the things like physics and energy and age of vehicle fleets sort of thing. What could fleets do to help people, and so their drivers and wider staff and communities as well, to understand the safe system and some of the key aspects of that and why it's so important to road safety? I'm just putting it out there for any suggestions or anything, Mike, that when you talked about kind of culture, so your culture change internally, work that you do with your drivers and wider staff to communicate some of those important factors of road safety.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's an interesting one. We have we had an aging vehicle fleet for a while there, and now the last couple of years we've been upgrading our fleet quite a bit. And I think, some examples of what happened, we got some new vehicles which have new safety features, and in some respects, the new Toyota Hiluxes are automatic and drive differently when you're off the road. So what we didn't do is train and educate our people on how to use those vehicles as to what the safety features were. And so we had to get hold of Toyota and help us develop a very quick training program, because we had a couple of incidents. Fortunately, they were very minor incidents by people who've been driving these Toyota Hiluxes and double and single cabs for years and years, yet basically lost control of them when they got the new ones delivered. And so I think it's organisations like DOC and others and the fleet providers should really make sure these vehicles rolled out with a really good competency or training program around them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mike. Anything? Yeah, Marcus, do you want to add something?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add from, from our company perspective. I think a lot of it is around company culture. We've talked about this before. Maybe that you, if you've got a culture where you feel tired or you're just not ready for a good day's drive, that you can actually feel that you can speak up and say, well, actually, today I can't do this. I know there's other pressures, but the consequence of perhaps not going out on a business trip is probably a lot less than someone going out tired and actually having a head-on crash, for example. So I think just having that sort of environment where people can actually, just speak freely and not have to be the sort of the lone voice and be brave.
That's a really good point, Marcus, and probably one I overlooked earlier on, because DOC staff being the people that they are, our jobs or Department of Conservation jobs to people are their their hobby or their passion, and so people in DOC go that extra a mile, quite literally, to get the work done. And what we found with our incidents was that people were just seeing vehicles as a means to get there and back to the job, but not part of their job, and weren't really working in vehicle driving into their work programs regarding fatigue. And so we've done a lot of work around that area as well to ensure that it's actually vehicle is part of your 8-hour or 9-hour day, or however long you work, and it's okay to stay somewhere overnight. I think we've still got a bit of work to do in that area, because we still get stories of very long drives, but people will stay the day longer until they get the job done and then decide to travel 3 hours home. So that's a culture we've had to change.
The only thing I would add is that recognition, particularly around the kind of vehicle fleets we have in New Zealand, which are slightly older, that the difference of your outcome in a 1-star vehicle to a 5-star vehicle is quite substantial. You're twice as likely to be seriously hurt in the 1-star vehicle. So the selection of the features and the kind of age of the vehicle becomes really important, and there's lots of resources out there with NCAP and even in the Waka Kotahi resources for used vehicles there that can help pick the safest vehicle for your fleet.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Adam. And also, I guess personal vehicles as well, because actually some of it is, whilst you might drive a really safe vehicle when you're at work, if you're then jumping into a 1-star personal vehicle, obviously your risk increases at that point as well. So helping people understand more widely. And Mike, I just check, because you have volunteers at DOC as well, don't you? And but you include them in all of your safety programs, is that right?
Yeah, there's no difference in approach to our volunteers. DOC has 11 to 15,000 volunteers working for us a year, but very, very few of them are driving vehicles, of course. But if they do drive vehicles, then it's exactly the same approach applies to them.
Yeah, so that's great to see as well, and that shares some of those messages more widely than just those who are driving all day, every day, potentially as part of their role, which is great. I should also have said, if any of you had questions for each other as well, you're welcome to ask those if there's anything more that you guys wanted to know. I don't think
I've got one question I'd like to ask of Adam. I'm not sure if it's a question or not, but I'm really interested in your Road to Zero campaign. I like it, actually. I like the adverts on TV and the messaging you have around it. I think it's really really quite good. And at the end of the day, the only target that you can possibly have is 0. You can't have, 100 people are going to die this year. It's always got to be 0. But I'm just interested in what feedback you may have had on that slogan, if I can call it, and because organisations over the last 20 years have used zero harm a lot as a banner around health and safety, and they've mostly gone away from it now because even Doc, we tried that for a few years. We got so much pushback on it, saying it's impossible. There's always someone going to get hurt, and so we've changed to safe home every day, basically. I'm just interested in your thoughts around that, because it could be quite difficult messaging to get across to Joe and Josephine in public.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, Mike. I think that there's that kind of conversation around absolute 0 and practically 0. And when you looked at those, for example, those survivability curves, and that's kind of what we designed to. We designed for pedestrian collisions to be 30 kph or less, or nose to side collisions, the T-bone collisions at 50 kph or less. But that doesn't eliminate every last bit of harm out of that. As you imagine, that it's that point where there's only a kind of 10% risk of you being killed or seriously hurt compared to the 80% with extra energy. So the messaging around 0, and the way I take it, it's actually not having a tolerance or an acceptance of having it. It might not necessarily be we get to fully 0. There'll be a very small residual of random crashes, but having that lack of tolerance for them occurring and making sure that you continue having that system approach really helps you to drive it down. Whereas if you don't have that target at 0 and you kind of drift, you just won't get the same gains.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Adam. I mean, I think one of the issues is if you said, well, 10% of the current road toll, which is probably annually around about 30 people, we kill about 300 people a year at the moment. If we said that's acceptable, then we'd probably end up, perhaps getting down to 40 or something. But if we aim for 0, we're going to strive a lot harder to get towards that figure. And there's a bit of a global movement as well now for the 0. And I do take your point, Mike. People, the first thing they often say is, well, you're never going to get there. But we are getting there's some traction internationally. In New York, for example, it's a Vision Zero city. So and I think they're looking at that perhaps in Hamilton as well. So it's starting to grow a bit of momentum. But yeah, there is some. I think it's messaging to go along with that that would help.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you all said, ethically, that's the only goal we can have, is 0, to say that it's it's not acceptable, any death or serious injury on our road. Thank you, all of you, for jumping in with that Q&A. That's great. We'll wrap up there. We've just got a couple of minutes to go, and I'll just wrap up on Shamor. Thanks for the feedback there. He's just posted in the chat, I saw. It's a great session, so we hope you've enjoyed the session, but thank you to all of the speakers. I've just got a couple of final slides with just a couple of events that we've got coming up to let you know about here. So our calendar of webinars and roundtables for the year is online on the Global Fleet Champions website, so please feel free to go and take a look at what else is coming up. But these are the next few events we've got in the calendar. So a webinar on driver distractions in May, a roundtable on sustainability followed by a webinar on sustainability for June and July as well, and then some others planned for later in the year. So do feel free to take a look and sign up for any of those that you're interested in. And we have also still got some sponsorship opportunities available for events this year, so if you're interested, do get in contact with me for some more information. And we're also very excited about our Global Fleet Champions Summit coming up in September. There are sponsorship, exhibitor and speaking opportunities available at the moment. So if you want to know more, please get in contact with me. And there will be options to attend the summit, fingers crossed, in person in New Zealand and in the UK, COVID permitting, and also virtually. And all of the details for this event are on the Global Fleet Champions website again. So please feel free to go and take a look at that and sign up if you're interested in attending. And the 2022 Australasian Fleet Champions Awards are now open for entries, with the deadline in June and the winners announced in October. Mike and Department of Conservation were one of the award winners at last year's awards, and we look forward to recognising some more award winners this year too. So please feel free to get involved if you have programmes that could be recognised as through those awards, and also if you have individuals, we do have a couple of individual awards as well, and we'd love to get nominations through from people for those too. All of those details are again online. And thank you for being part of Global Fleet Champions. We really appreciate you getting involved in sharing best practice around fleet safety. Brake itself, as you know, is a charity, and as always, we rely on donations, fundraisers and corporate supporters to help us continue that work, sharing best practice in road risk management and fleet safety, and providing free events and resources. And to continue our wider work too, to prevent road deaths and injuries, make communities safer and provide free support to people affected by crashes. So if you're able to help in some way, it's greatly appreciated, whether that is through buying a good gift card or an entertainment membership, being a partner, making a donation or fundraising for us in some way. And we're also shortly going to be part of the Generosity Generator crowdfunding campaign. So watch out for more details of that in the next couple of weeks and how you can support us. And if you'd like to discuss working with us more, then please feel free to get in contact with me. So I hope you found today's webinar useful and interesting. Please do, when we follow up from this session, we'll share, as I said, the recording and also some of the resources from this, but also we will share a feedback survey. So we'd love to get your feedback, which helps us to plan future events too. But thank you to all of our speakers today and to all of you for taking part, and we hope to see you at another webinar again soon.